Are you looking for the best suburb of Fort Worth? With so many options, it can seem like an overwhelming decision to make. But after doing some research, if you look at quality of life, schools, cost of living, that really narrows down, and I think I have the answer for you: Aledo. So in this video, I'm gonna break down exactly why I think Aledo is the best place to live near Fort Worth. Okay, now before we jump straight into the list, I do want to acknowledge that there are other reasonable suburb options in the Fort Worth area. I do think that Aledo is going to be a top choice and should be a top choice when you are making your selections though. So when you consider things like traffic, schools, price point, selections, like safety, the atmosphere, I think that all of those things combine to make Aledo the top choice. Some of these things may not matter to you, and that could adjust how you feel about what suburb's best for you. But watch to the end. Let me know if you have any questions. And if you are thinking about the Aledo area, there's gonna be a link in the description that's gonna let you search and browse homes in the Aledo area with no sign-in, no email required. So let's hop into the list. Okay, now to kick this list off, we're gonna start at number 7 and work our way down to the top reasons I think Aledo is gonna be a great fit and the best suburb of Fort Worth. But number 7 is gonna be the selections of homes and neighborhoods. So do you want brand new construction or residential development? Check. You want brand new construction on an acre or two? Check. You want a home in an established neighborhood in a residential development? Check. You want an established home on a lot with trees on an acre? Check. You want to find an estate style home on 3 to 5 to 8 acres that's 4, 5, 6,000 square feet that you can have horses on? Check. There's something for almost everyone out here. Now we also have the master planned communities, and there's really not a ton of those in the Fort Worth side of the Metroplex, and Aledo has 2. We have Walsh, which has everything you could think of and want out of a master planned community. We have Morningstar. I kind of jokingly call it like its little brother. Great neighborhood, great community, just lacks some of the flair maybe of Walsh and some of the higher end amenities. And we have Parks of Aledo. We have the reserves at Trinity, neighborhoods where there's an HOA, it's a nice development, but they don't have all the extras and glitter and pizzazz. And then we have high-end luxury, estate style homes. We have La Madera, you have Bear Creek, you have Bella Flora, and these homes are all $1 million plus homes. And then you have neighborhoods where, you have 100-year-old oak trees. You have my neighborhood, so McDavid Estates, you have Stone Creek, those are 2 really good ones. You have Covered Bridges. These are homes where all the homes were built in late 90s, early 2000s, maybe 1996 up to 2008-ish. And it's kind of funny. So when I try to get drone shots of these neighborhoods, it's hard to get a good shot of houses because there's so many trees. And so, you've got just your sprawling lot, maybe, and it's a development, like it's uniform, but you've all got an acre. So you have some breathing room. Your kids can ride scooters on big long driveways. You can go for walks. And so you have something for most people. Really, when it comes to the selection of what someone wants to buy, that's not ever the issue out in the Aledo area. It's gonna be the distance to Fort Worth, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I'm gonna say the first reason we're covering, so reason number 7, is just gonna be the selections of homes and neighborhoods that you have to pick from if you are considering the Aledo area. Okay, now reason number 6 that I think Aledo is a top option for you if you're considering a Fort Worth suburb is the investment potential and the growth. And now the reason it's number 6 and not number 1 or number 2 is because for your personal home, I'm an investor. I invest in residential real estate, I invest in businesses, I invest in passive stuff. But when it comes to your personal home, I don't think the investment aspect of your personal home should be the top concern. Now you might disagree with me, put it in the comment section below if you do. But if you can buy a home that fits all your other needs and also has the potential for growth, and especially growth above a market average, I think that's a great option. I just don't think it should be your number 1 selection criteria. But let's talk about that. So we'll talk about some values later in the video in the couple of reasons I think Aledo is the best option. But over the last 25 or 30 years, you've had a lot of residential development, a lot particularly in the last maybe 10 years with a lot of the newer communities that have been built, as I just mentioned, but you haven't had a lot of commercial development yet. So currently, a lot of people want to move to Aledo Aledo for the schools, for the environment, and all the stuff that we will talk about and have talked about. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe, check out the other videos. But what you haven't seen is people who want that commercial aspect much closer to them. So like if we want Costco, we got to go into Fort Worth. If we want like a high-end, like all natural food market, you know, like Natural Grocers, something like that, Central Market, we got to go into Fort Worth. So currently you have all these people who they're willing to do that. Like maybe they work in Fort Worth, they live out here, but if they want the extra stuff, they got to do it before or after work. On the weekends, they got to go into Fort Worth, all that stuff. As commercial development, which is beginning, and as that begins and increases, and we start to build out some nice commercial, nice retail, high-end restaurants, the desirability of the Aledo area is going to increase even more. And so then we're gonna start seeing, I've had people reach out and they say, hey Jared, when are the coffee shops gonna be going in at Walsh? When's the Central Market? When's the Whole Foods gonna be going in? We don't actually have plans for that yet that I'm aware of. We do have a Costco going in, and it says Weatherford, but really it's like just the far edge, just a little bit past like the Aledo ISD area. So that's gonna be super close to our house. That's gonna be great. But I have people that I know are not moving to the Aledo area yet because they want their shopping to be a lot closer. They don't want to drive 20 minutes or 25 minutes to go to their specialty stores. They want it to be very close to them. When that starts happening and when that starts to get built out and when the new construction ends, right? When there's not a ton of new construction available, you're gonna start to see home values and home prices rise across the board simply because even more people are gonna be wanting to move into the area. So buying in the area now is gonna be a great option. Whereas if you were to buy in some of the other, you know, maybe top or considerable options, Mansfield, so Southlake already is totally built out and it's already super highly priced, which we'll talk about in a minute. But like Mansfield, there's really not any significant development that's gonna be going on. So you're gonna have just whatever market values do. Keller, same thing. They've had a lot of commercial development, but they're really not gonna have a whole lot more. So that's something to consider. There's something specific that will be happening in the Aledo area that will in particular drive prices, that will give a boost or some nitro to the market factors in play, which the market factors will impact everything. But we are seeing right now, even some of the top neighborhoods, top selection of homes are selling fast and not seeing price reductions, even though the market that we're in Q1 of 2025, anything that's not top shelf is struggling right now. So potential growth, potential investment. I don't really love thinking about a personal home as an investment, but that potential growth as the Aledo area continues to grow is something to consider as you're making your options. Okay, now reason number 5 is the outdoor activities and parks and hiking and biking and riding trails that we have access to. So a lot of other communities have just been so built out, and developers and cities have gobbled up the land and made it so dense that you just don't get this type of stuff like with immediate access. So you might be able to go find somewhere to go mountain biking or hiking, but you might be driving 30, 45 minutes an hour to get across the Metroplex for the one place that everyone goes. Whereas in Aledo, we have, you know, the Parks of Aledo trails right there. You have 12 plus miles of mountain biking and hiking trails that are in and around a neighborhood. They're like a mile from downtown. So anyone who lives in the Aledo area as a whole can get there in like 10 or 15 minutes. And that's if you live kind of far away for the Aledo area, you know, the northern section or the southern portion. So lots of green space. That is actually one of the things that I've commented on, I mean, with a client just yesterday as of recording this, was that one of my favorite things about living out in Aledo now is that when I do come home from out of the area, you know, maybe I showed a house in Fort Worth or something, and I'm coming back into Aledo, I'm coming home, really I get to see green space as I come home. I get to decompress, I see pasture land, I see trees, I see, you know, cows on the side of the road. You see, you know, not uncommon to see multiple deer in the trees if you're driving in the morning or later in the evening, not really in the middle of the day. But really kind of that outdoor aspect to living out in the Aledo area is just something that is really nice. You really feel like you're away from the hustle and bustle, and it's a really calming feeling being out in the Aledo area. Okay, now reason number 4 that I think Aledo is such a great place to live is you really get this small town feel with all the perks and access of a big city. So you still get that with some of these other suburbs, but what you really get out here is really the small town feel. That's the difference. As goofy as this sounds, like the Aledo Facebook page, kind of where the Aledo Daily Buzz, is where in larger cities, it's just like mudslinging all the time. Just complaining, just people fighting, just people bickering. What I think has been really neat about the Aledo Buzz is that you actually get people who know each other commenting back and forth and talking to each other. So you get that small town feel, that interconnectedness. There's lots of locally owned shop, and restaurants is growing. So I really like locally owned restaurants. I typically eat at a locally owned restaurant if I can, if I'm going out for lunch for an easy dinner or something like that. The locally owned atmosphere, you get an owner in the shop, they're coming out, they're asking you how the food is. And so I really like that. Now, one of the other things is that in these, smaller towns, there's oftentimes less crime. And that's not universal. And I'm not saying there's no crime in Aledo, but the interesting thing is if you go and start looking at crime rates for different cities in the area, websites like, niche.com, they don't even register a crime rate because there's such a low or non-existent, at least reporting, right? A really interesting thing was there was some sort of car chase or police chasing, someone who had stolen a car. It wasn't done in Aledo, but they think they left Fort Worth, honestly. They're running out of Fort Worth, they exited, they ran up into walls, they drove around, they parked their car in a field or something, they got out, and having a car chase that ended in our town, in a neighborhood, was such an anomaly that it was the talk of the town for weeks. And so that was just an example of when something does happen, even though it didn't, the crime didn't happen here in Aledo, the fact that it even touched us was just a huge point of conversation. Hey, did you see that? Did you see the helicopter? Did you see the car? And so that's something to think about. We're not a community where something like that happens and nobody thinks about it. And it's just oh, one more day and one more crime. So you have that small town feel, you have that feel of safety, and granted, anything could happen anywhere, but that is not the norm. That is not common in the Aledo area. And even Fort Worth, it does have a slightly lower crime rate than the US as a whole, but Aledo is going to be statistically a significantly safer place to be than Fort Worth or even most of the suburbs in the area. Okay, now reason number 3 that I think if you're relocating to Fort Worth that Aledo should be a top choice for you to consider is going to be the proximity to Fort Worth and how that plays out with traffic. So it's not just linear distance, it's not just the miles you drive, it's the time it takes to drive it. So it's traffic related. I grew up in the Arlington area. I spent a lot of time in Mansfield. My parents live in Arlington still. I've driven north, I've driven east, I've driven south, and I've got to tell you that if you pull up a map of the DFW Metroplex in Google Maps that shows the traffic during rush hour. While yes, the Fort Worth side of the Metroplex is better as a whole. It is better than the Dallas side of the Metroplex. There's just less traffic in general. When you go into the northeast quadrant of Tarrant County, Fort Worth area, you get into the mid cities, you get to the east side, you get into Arlington, that traffic is rough. It is not fun. You get into where 20 and 820 and 287 all connect, kind of at the western edge of Arlington. It's awful. It's no fun. It doesn't even make sense sometimes why it gets so packed. The highway's already a 4-lane highway going both directions, or it's maybe 5 lanes. Going north is pretty much awful every time of the day. There's a running joke that construction on 35 never stops. It's hey, we currently have a need to make the highway larger because of current traffic needs. Let's start on that now. And by the time they're done with that plan, they have more traffic needs, have to start again. So it's just super frustrating. Going south, the primary issue is they haven't expanded that highway yet. So your highway is narrower going south from Fort Worth than it is going north. And so what's gonna happen is they're finally gonna look at south, going 35 south, and they're gonna say, oh wait, we need more traffic, or we need more traffic ability, so let's start construction on that. And so currently, while there is a portion of I-30 that's typically does slow down during rush hour, kind of where 820 and 30 cross, typically whichever way you're going at the early side of that. That is the one bad spot of traffic going out to Aledo, to the Parker County area between Aledo and Fort Worth. It was a little bit longer of a drive, but I'd go down 20 and then back up Chisholm sometimes when I would go into Fort Worth because it was a little bit faster, even though it was a little bit of a longer drive. But during the day, when it's not in a 1 hour window, and the rush hour window for us, Aledo to Fort Worth is pretty small. It's maybe a 1 hour window. It's not a 3 hour window. So the traffic and how the traffic plays into distance is significantly better. One thing to note about some of the other top rated suburbs, like let's say Southlake, that's just, even with no traffic, you're looking at a 30-minute drive to get to downtown on all highways. And so it's just a little extra far out there. And so I really got to say that Aledo does a great job of blending that distance and time and reduced traffic flow. Okay, now before we hop into the top 2 reasons that I think Aledo is the top suburb of Fort Worth, I do want to quickly remind you that if this is your first time on the channel and you want to know more about living in the Aledo area, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you are a returning viewer, thank you for watching. If you have plans to visit the Aledo area because you've decided Aledo is the fit for you, reach out. All my contact information is in the description box below. Let's get a conversation started so that we can hit the ground running when you get into town. Okay, so the number 2 reason that I think Aledo is going to be the top choice for most people relocating to Fort Worth is that it is a more affordable suburb for luxury living. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, the property tax rates are going to be lower than most of the other cities that are suburbs of Fort Worth. In particular, some of the other higher end, really nice, kind of exclusive communities like Southlake, like Trophy Club, like Colleyville, and even Keller, which isn't necessarily itself as a whole a high-end community, but Keller does have some high-end areas. So you're gonna get larger lots, you're gonna get larger homes, you're gonna have lower taxes, all for the same price home. So more affordable, just standard cost of living, like carrying cost of the home that you buy. And then what does that home look like? Well, I've covered in other videos, but the average priced home that sold in the Aledo area was between $600 and $750. You know, that's kind of if you're looking at averages versus medians. Well, if you go over to Southlake, which really probably is a city that we get a lot of comparison to out in Aledo. And it's really not that we're super comparable right now, but a lot of people, and I kind of agree that Aledo is the Southlake of 20 years ago. So the real difference here is that the average sold home in Southlake last year was between $1.3 and $1.5 million. So a little over 2 times the purchase price is what you're going to be looking for the average home in Southlake. So that's an enormous cost savings. A lot of the professional athletes that live in the DFW area live in Southlake. A lot of really, really highly paid CEOs of very, very large corporations live in Southlake. I mean, that is where there's a ton of money, and that turns into incredibly high sales prices. So the average home in the Southlake area was like 1.3 to 1.5 million for like 4,000 square feet. And the average homes in the Aledo area are like 6 to 750 for just a little bit smaller than that, maybe 35-ish hundred. So I think that's a really strong edge that Aledo has over Southlake and a lot of the other areas as well, but that's a specific example on how much less expensive finding a great property in the Aledo areas over other top suburbs like Southlake. All right, now finally we are getting to number 1, and this will not be a surprise for any of you who've been on the channel for very long or done any significant research, but if this is your first time on the channel, the number 1 reason that I think Aledo is gonna be the top suburb for Fort Worth, Texas is its highly rated school district. So Aledo ISD is consistently in the top 10% of school districts in Texas as a whole. And when you start narrowing down, school districts that you're looking for by the metropolitan area, the major city you want to be in, if you're looking in the Fort Worth side of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, that's going to cut out some really highly rated school districts. There are some really highly rated ones in the North Dallas area, north of Dallas. But what we're looking at is now we're looking at the west side of the Metroplex. And that really gives you maybe 2 or maybe 3 highly rated school districts, Aledo being one. The only other school district that really is going to strongly compare is that Carroll ISD, where Southlake is what everyone thinks of. So a lot of people reference that kind of high schools like Southlake, Carroll, but Carroll ISD, super highly rated. I think that's going to be one of the best comparisons or options if you're looking for school district specifically. Now there are other school districts that have some really good schools in it. So you have, if you're looking for like an overall good school district that might have some struggling schools, you have Keller, which is north Fort Worth. You have Northwest ISD, which is even further north and west, hence the Northwest ISD as well. And then you have some, they're still above average. So if you're in the area, Aledo doesn't work, there are some areas that have above average school districts. You have like Birdville ISD and Mansfield ISD. And then you have some average school districts, average as a whole, where maybe you have a couple of really good schools, maybe some really good elementary schools, but the school district as a whole just isn't stellar when it comes to college prep, test scores, stuff like that. And that's honestly like where I grew up, Arlington. It's an average school district for Texas. And then Burleson, so if you go south from Fort Worth, it's, you know, all of its scores, if you're looking at something like greatschools.org, they're in the average range. And then you get below average, and that's gonna be Fort Worth ISD for the most part, and in Crowley. So I'll be doing a pro and con on Fort Worth. We'll dive more into the schools on that. But I jokingly say that nobody moves to Fort Worth for the schools. However, a whole lot of people move to Aledo for the schools. So schools is the #1 reason that I think Aledo's a top suburb, the top suburb for Fort Worth, and it really puts the cherry on top based on a lot of these other options and issues we've covered today. Okay, so you tell me, what do you think? Is Aledo the top suburb of Fort Worth? I personally think it is, but I am biased. So if you are thinking about moving to Aledo area, there's gonna be a link in the description below that's going to allow you to freely search and browse homes for sale in the Aledo area. It doesn't require a sign-in, it doesn't require email address. I just wanna let you browse and look around. And if you are already considering a move to the Aledo area, all my contact information is in the description box below. Reach out however is most convenient. Let's get that conversation started so that we can come up with a plan. So if you're coming in town, I can set some time aside for you. And if this is your first time on the channel and you're like, Aledo looks interesting, but I'm not quite sure yet, hit that subscribe button. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.